I mean, but then if you look at the army and some of the finances there's more money that...
What happens when a political argument falls apart the moment someone asks a simple question? That's exactly what James O'Brien does here. The caller argues that military pensions are taking up more money than actual defense spending. James immediately challenges the logic. So we're against pensions for soldiers now, are we? The caller quickly says no, but James points out the real problem: the argument hasn't been properly thought through. And that's what makes this exchange so revealing. A talking point can sound convincing until someone starts asking basic questions about what it actually proves. James isn't letting the caller hide behind a headline figure. He's forcing him to explain the argument, and that's where things begin to unravel. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one.
And we look at the society that we inhabit. The people who have got the most have benefited the most in financial terms from our shared resources. They've benefited from the education system because they have an educated workforce. They've benefited from the transport system because their business couldn't operate without decent transport links. They've benefited from the National Health Service because the National Health Service keeps their workforce healthy. These aren't going to apply to everybody who's got a ton of money, but, you know, there'll be other things you benefit from. You benefit from having a base, a home in a country that is a cultural hotbed. You benefit from being able to go and do things that you can't do in other places. There's history here. There's history, population, and luck. And if you've ended up with a ton of money, you are lucky. It's a patriotic thing to do, no? 0345 6060 973. I always think Alan Sugar, I think. I may be misremembering this, but I think Alan Sugar stuck a cheque once on Twitter showing how much income tax he paid. And I remember thinking, that's brilliant. What a legend. Look how much income tax that man is paying. I remember thinking, that's what we should be celebrating. Am I sounding nuts? Or am I just sounding like somebody who is talking sense in a world where almost all of the effort in our media is put into mocking voices like mine? Mocking voices. I mean, the real idiots say, well, if you want to pay more tax, you can. Why don't you pay it voluntarily? Which I think is such a boneheaded argument that you wonder whether or not the people making it should be allowed near scissors. But then you look at the fact that Boris Johnson got elected, that Brexit got voted for, that Liz Truss was described as an economic genius by the same newspapers that are furious at the prospect of a wealth tax. You look at the support for people like Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu among British people who have apparently been educated, and you realise people can be persuaded into almost any imaginable position, up to and including climate change denial. So, of course, you're going to be able to persuade people that they're against a wealth tax in the same way that you persuaded them Brexit was a good idea. Boris Johnson was a stand-up guy. Liz Truss was an economic genius. Austerity was a necessary corrective for the catastrophes caused by the greed of bankers right around the world. That Donald Trump is the best thing since sliced bread, and that Benjamin Netanyahu has got Israel's interests at heart rather than his own. You can persuade people of anything, absolutely anything. So of course you can persuade them that a wealth tax is a bad idea. Is that the point here? Is that why I'm struggling with the subject? Because it's just another thing to stick on the same list of the bleeding obvious, but a significant portion of our population has been persuaded to reject the evidence of their own eyes and ears. It's just fair. Where else are you going to get the money from? Get it off the scroungers. Well, who told you about the scroungers? Oh, the people that own the newspaper. Oh yeah. Get it off the immigrants. Who's obsessing about the immigrants? Yeah. And what did they tell you about Brexit? They told me it'd be brilliant. What did they tell you about Boris Johnson? They told me he was a legend. What did they tell you about Donald Trump? They told me I had Trump derangement syndrome when I kept pointing out what a wrong 'un he was. Is the wealth tax just another... That's the question. Is it just another thing that ordinary, decent people have been persuaded to oppose by extraordinary, indecent people? Is it another Brexit? Is it another Boris? I don't know. I think it probably is. But I want you to tell me your relationship with it, and particularly why you're against it, even though you will never in a billion years be required to pay it. 03.
I mean, but then if you look at the army and some of the finances there's more money that goes on pensions than actually spending on defence.
So we're against pensions for soldiers now, are we?
Not at all.
Well, what then?
But I think...
Because I mean, respectfully... I know you haven't thought it through, so I mean, that's fair enough. Next time, maybe do. But respectfully, all of the objections to it sound like this, don't they? It's, well, no, I'm absolutely fine paying more, but I just need to know this, that or the other. But none of us ever. You can look at the tax pie chart on the HMRC website. You can see exactly where your taxes go in percentage terms, and the things that populists and far-right figures like to pretend it all goes on are usually close to negligible. Social care is absolutely huge. So let's say that the majority of your wealth tax will go on social care. What's the problem with that?
Not at all. No issue. With an ageing mother, 100%.
Do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I completely agree. But I think where I'm coming from is I think that's some people's objections. It's where it's spent.
It's not, though. This is where I'm coming from. Is I'm saying it's not, though. That's a cop-out. For the reason I've just demonstrated to you, is that nobody gets to say what their tax does and doesn't get spent on. That's the price of being a member of a civilised society.
Yep.
Your governments decide what tax gets spent on, and we elect government. So you've already got that process. And if 73% of 66% of the population want a wealth tax, then they've decided that they want it.
Yep. Yeah, for me, it's more a case of if I've got the money and it's a lot of money in the bank. I mean, you keep referring to 11 million. That would be a lot of money.
Yeah.
But I think.
But 20,000 wouldn't be, would it?
It wouldn't be. But to your point, you made a really good point earlier in that. Is it liquid? Is it tied up in?
Yeah, but you've got 11 million pounds of taxable assets. You can find 20 grand without even noticing. It's probably down the back of the sofa.
You'd hope not, but
I'm not even joking. And thanks for being a good sport, because I don't think that anyone's got a better argument than you've got, and they do sound like quibbles, if you like, or like wriggles, or like weaselly little ways out of doing what I would loosely describe as your patriotic duty. But I
think most problems in our society today can be traced back to wealth inequality.
Yeah.
Including, education, government spending.
And if you were a beneficiary of that epic inequality, if you were on the right side of it, what would you be telling people to think about welfare claimants and immigrants?
Well, exactly. Of course, I'd be telling my media outlets that I own. I would be telling them to push those stories.
Let's go big. Let's go big on the immigrants. Won't somebody think of a billionaire? Luke, lovely. No Hostages points out that what sinks a wealth tax is lobbying, not necessarily logic. Lobbying. Why do you think climate change was denied so successfully for so long? Spoiler alert, lobbying. Why do you think we are still pouring processed food down our children's necks, even as we weekly clock the obesity crisis? Yeah, lobbying. Why do you think that countries that are undertaking genocide can retain enormous support from other democracies in the world? Answer, lobbying. I mean, lobbying is the root of almost all of the things that are against the interests of a general population. It's lobbying. Why do you think Brexit happened? Lobbying. It's lobbying. And the wealth tax could be killed by lobbying. The wealthy lobby for the loopholes, the exemptions and the discounts, and they point to the hollowed out tax system and say, look, it doesn't work. So the sabotage becomes the argument against the policy. So they say, we don't get a wealth tax because everyone will leave. Okay, well, we'll have an exit tax as well. So we'll have an exit tax of 10%. We'll have a wealth tax of 2% on your assets over 10 million, right? If you don't like that and you're going to take your assets somewhere else, we'll have an exit tax of 10%. So we'll take 10. Do you see what I mean? And that's still barely going to touch the sides of your wealth, but it would also be a reminder of why you decided to live here in the first place. Because if the only reason you live in the United Kingdom is because of its billionaire-friendly tax laws, I've got a bridge I'd like to sell you. It's great living here. It's a wonderful country, wonderful, especially if you're lucky enough to live in London or Kidderminster. These are the two finest conurbations in the history of humanity.
And there you have it. The moment James applied some basic logic, the argument started falling apart. The caller's admission that he hadn't thought it through says a lot. Instead of questioning where the real wealth and power are concentrated, people are often pushed toward easier targets, benefits, immigration, small boats, and endless culture war battles. And that distraction matters. Because while everyone is arguing over those issues, bigger questions about wealth, inequality, and political influence can get pushed into the background. David's argument sounded confident at first, but once James started asking simple questions, the weaknesses became impossible to ignore. That's the real lesson here. Don't just accept political talking points because they sound convincing. Question them. What do you think about this exchange? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more political commentary.